attendees are leaving at this time.
Good morning. Welcome to Mammoth Cave National Park. I'm Ranger Jerry. I am going to do my best to portray my great-great-grandpa, Materson Bransford. It's about an 1857 reenactment, pre-Civil War and Civil War. We're going to also talk about Nick, who was said to be his brother, but only shared his owner's last name, their owner's last name, and the magnificent Stephen Bishop. So what we're going to do, we're glad and honored and delighted that you came with us on this walk, and we're going to take a few moments and try to go back in history and get some of the things, and just imagine that you're in the cave, and this lantern is what we're going to need so we can see where we're going. Okay. So anything you need to ask me before we start going? In case you have a tour, and if it's crowded, we're just going to go across the bridge, make a right, and then we're going to go back to the old guide cemetery, and then if you can just always double back if you see that it's crowding your tour time. Okay. All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Matt.
Hi.
Best I can tell, is getting about 1857, and came here when I was about 16 years old from Nashville. You heard of Nashville, Tennessee?
Yes, sir.
You know what? Somebody told me that Nashville, Tennessee is as far as the world goes. You reckon that's true? And there's a place called, by the way, old Captain let me go to Louisville last year and get some supplies, me, Nick, and Stephen. We got up there and we saw a river called the Ohio River. I had never seen nothing like that. It's slightly bigger than the Green River down there at Mammoth Cave. So what we're going to do, we're so glad that you came with us on this tour today, and we're at the historic entrance. And best I can tell, I done walked through this cave 3 times the distance around the world, but Nick say that can't be true. But I'll tell you this, I sure have been here a long time. Good morning. My name is Matt. I'm a slave guide here. Oh, by the way, do you know what being a slave means? Usually it means not having freedom. I'm the only slave or few slaves you ever will find that gets to take care of free people depending on me. You know, 2 years ago I had a doctor from St. Louis, Missouri. He gets down inside the cave, he starts giving me a hard time, and he tells me he's getting up on top of rocks and doing all kinds of things at Old Boss. Oh, Old Boss, his name is Franklin Gorin. He's from a place called Glasgow. And you know what? He's an attorney at law, and he's business partner with my owner. And you know what my owner told me? He told me very quietly that he was also my daddy. A little slave girl in Nashville, Tennessee named Little Hannah. He fathered me around 1815. So over at Glasgow, where the old Thomas Bransford, my daddy, say much about it, he done said enough to me to let me know that I is his son, and occasionally he'll come back over here to Mammoth Cave and see me, because he is wealthy, I'm telling you. So let's go on down to the historic entrance, and this here lantern is what we're going to be using as we go over and start going down to this cave here. Oh, one more thing I was going to tell you about this cave. I had a real strange man last summer. He said he was from a place called Germany. Said something about he was on a boat for 3 weeks getting here on this great big body of water. I think that man was delusional. That word delusional, I learned that word from a man named from Harvard University. He told me that word delusional means that somebody ain't talking with real good sense, you know. So he said he was aboard a boat for 6 weeks, getting to a place called New York on a boat, and that water was up and down. And I do believe that man was out of his mind, because anybody in the whole world knows there ain't no body of water in the world any wider than the Green River, and ain't no body of water in the world wider than the Ohio River up in Louisville, Kentucky. But sometimes you just have to let your guests have their imagination and let them have their own way. You agree with that?
Yes.
That's why I get to run around free, because I'm making old Captain plenty of money. And he's happy with the service that Stephen Bishop and me and Nick all give him. Let's go on down to this cave and get started here. folks come on up here close to me. I've got something I want to sure tell you that I ain't never told nobody else. I had some folks from England last summer. And you know, this here basket I got and this lantern is what we need for supplies. So we get down there on the Echo River and it's time to have lunch. And old captain said, now, when you serve lunch, you, Nick, and Stephen, make sure you go other side of the room and don't be eating with them free people. But those folks from England seemed like they were so glad and so happy that I done had them in the cave for 10 hours. And I took them and took good care of them. I did. And they told me, said, if I don't tell old Captain, well, we call him Captain, but his name is Franklin Gorin. Said, don't tell him, but if you would, come on over to our table, and we got to sit down there and eat with free people. And you know what I found out? That food seemed to taste just as good if you eat with free people or if you eating with slaves, you know what? And I ain't gonna tell nobody I did that, and make sure you don't either, okay? You know, we down here at the historic entrance of this cave. Every time we think we've seen all of this cave, we go exploring and we just keep on finding more and more cave. You feel that cool air coming out? That's that cool air coming out probably from sinkholes all around here because it's a hot summer day. But last winter we were down here on a cold day and the air was intaking. And old captain told me that the cave exchanges its own air every day and a half. He said, be careful with these here lanterns because if you get down in that breezeway, these lanterns go out. And I told a man last summer that the lantern went out. I had a tour group of about, best I can tell is about 50 people. He said, Nick and Stephen and Matt, if the lantern goes out and we deep in the cave, what are you supposed to do? You know what I did? I played a joke on him. I told him, if this here lantern goes out, every man for himself.
I have a question for you, Mr. Bransford.
Yes.
You said that doctor fellow who was down there was not obeying your instructions. Now, what happened with
Well, what he did, you know, me being a slave, I'm never supposed to be talking back to free people. First of all, he was climbing on top of rocks.
Yeah.
And, you know, we want this cave to look just as good 100 years from now when people come to see it. And he was determined, and he was talking about his feet was hurting. He was slightly overweight. So he getting up on top of them rocks, and my brothers Nick say, you get off of them rocks and take them rocks out of your pocket. What if everybody come down here to this cave and want to be taking rocks? Wouldn't be no rocks left. So he wants to go back, and I told him before the tour that I told him all the stuff that he can expect about the tour. He gets down there 6 miles into the cave and he's whining and he's complaining, and I told him that I ain't gonna take you back. He told me I dare talk back to him, but you know what else? Down here in this cave, 6 or 7 miles in, I can talk back who I want to. And I give him this here lantern, and I say, I tell you what you do, doctor. You walk 5.5 miles in that direction, and you bound to come to daylight. You just keep a walking and keep it walking till you comes to an area that we call the twilight zone. So he took a lantern, because we carry extra lanterns. He walked a few yards and he came back. His eyes was kind of bulged and he was shaking. You know what he said? He said, Matt, I think I'm going to go with you after all. Good morning. Good morning. You want to go with us on our walk?
We got a tour supposed to be in 20 minutes.
There you go, okay.
Enjoy.
You know that Stephen Bishop? That Stephen Bishop is one of the best, smartest guys I have ever known. Have you heard of Stephen Bishop? I'll tell you what, there's folks come all the way back over here from a place called England, and they've been here, and they asked for Stephen Bishop, and sometimes they ask for me, but I tell you what, that Stephen Bishop, he sure got a way about him, right? He tells good jokes, he's tall and lean, and he's handsome, and he sure knows a whole lot about that cave. He said he was going to cross that bottomless pit. I told him 5 years ago, you need to forget about that bottomless pit, because people go to into that bottomless pit and they drop things over the side and they seem to never hear anything down there, a splash like it's hitting water. They never hear anything down there like there's some mud and the sound come back. So he told me that he was ordered to go a place in the cave where no one's ever been. And you know what he's going to do? He's going to cross that bottomless pit. Well, he goes out into the forestry and he makes up a tree and a ladder. He scoots across that bottomless pit with a lantern about his neck, and he continues on. He continues on, and he finds the bottom of the bottomless pit. And guess what he finds out? That bottomless pit ain't bottomless at all.
But how did he went down there?
Well, what he did, he scooted across. He went on down to the place called the River Room, you see. And there's a place down there that's where you can go to the bottomless pit. And if I tell you another secret, you promise you never tell nobody. You promise me, right? Mm-hmm. That bottomless pit is 105 foot deep. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to continue to let people think it's bottomless. Because we have more fun if they don't know how deep it is, right? You know what, down them saltpeter pits, well, the saltpeter pits are actually things left over from that war, the War of 1812. You know what, Nick says sometimes he's kind of quiet, he's a little bit more reserved, so maybe his jokes is not as good as mine, me being Matt and Stephen. So he tells them jokes, but he don't get much punchline out of it. So I told him what he's going to have to do is find a way to make people laugh, you know. So he decided that he was going to grow some corn next summer. Now, why is he growing corn? Because as we go inside the rotunda and a few yards back, we can find Peter dirt, or places where they used to wash the Peter dirt. You heard of Peter dirt?
I don't
Peter,
know.
You don't know? Do you want me to tell you? Thought you'd never ask. During the War of 1812, they had to wash the dirt to make black gunpowder. The gunpowder is a result of components of chemicals from bat droppings. One real famous man called it bat guano. Have you heard of bat guano? And then another guy said, that's just a sophisticated way of saying bat poop. Took me a while to learn how to say bat guano. So Nick go down there and he find them corn cobs on the ground. He found them corn cobs where they used to have those things called oxens down there, right? He found out that people would give 50 cents. Some wealthy man from up in New York State, Philadelphia, so he wanted to have a corn cob, told Nick he'd give him 75 cents for one of those. So you know what that Nick did? He's quiet, but he's sure shrewd. He sold all them cobs up, didn't have no more to sell people. So he called me and Stephen to the side at the end of last season. He said, you know what, boys? He said, I think next year I'm going to have to grow an extra big crop of corn so we can put some cobs down there for sale. Franklin Dorn from over at Glasgow, pretty powerful man. As a matter of fact, Thomas Bransford of Glasgow and Franklin Dorn of Glasgow are two most powerful men around here, but they like us. I tell you, they like us mighty well, but he made a deal with a doctor from Louisville named Dr. Cron. Now, Franklin Dorn done paid $5,000 for that cave with Idea Tourism. Whole lot of money. Considered I made $50 last year. I can't imagine how anybody could pay $5,000 for anything. So he keeps that cave 1 year, and there's a doctor from Louisville, Kentucky, named Dr. Cron, say he give him $10,000 for that cave. Not a bad deal if you keep the cave just 1 year and make a $5,000 profit, right? Mm-hmm. But you know, part of the deal was he sold Stephen with the cave. Now, it ain't no secret that Dr. Cron seemed to favor Stephen. We all do pretty good, but you know what? We all know that if we don't get along down there, it wouldn't go so good, right? So sometimes we get in power struggles, you know how young cave guys and explorers might do. So we had a little conference. Conference means, you want me to tell you what conference means?
Yes.
It means that you gets together and you figure out a plan that works good for everybody. So we get together and we say, well, let's not get into a struggle or a power struggle about no matter who Dr. Cron likes the best. If we play our cards right, we all gets to have a good life in this cave, tour guiding, and I ain't got to work in that tobacco patch, and I ain't got to work in that barn lot. So we know that Dr. Cron favors Stephen, but you know that's all right. Stephen Bishop done draw a map of that cave. He done draw a map of the cave. He gets to go up to Locust Grove, to Louisville, Kentucky, to Dr. Cron's estate. Oh, Dr. Cron is wealthy. But when Stephen was up there a couple years ago, he saw a slave girl named Charlotte. He comes back down here and he tells us what Charlotte looked like. I declare, I don't believe no girl in the whole world looks as good as he described Charlotte. So anyway, she comes down here. I think Dr. Cron see that they sparking. You know what sparking means, don't you? Mm-hmm. Well, in case you don't know, it means that they showing special interest to each other. So somebody said they're gonna get married up. So he brings Charlotte up to the guide shack where me and Nick were. That's Stephen Bishop. And you know what, I guess he done found the prettiest girl I think I have ever seen. Somebody say someday there might be a girl named Halle Berry that's born that's just as pretty as she is. Boy, she's pretty. They say that Charlotte was just as pretty as anything you'd ever seen.
He wasn't bad.
Rucker Road, Charlottesville.
down that road called River Road. And sometimes we sang to our people down there, and they sang. They call it echo because, well, you know what echo means? It means if you say something loud or sing loud, it seems like that sound goes out there and it comes back, and sometimes it makes sounds that echo off the cave walls, or at least that's how a scientist explained it to me. I just know it sounds kind of spooky, sounds kind of good down on the Echo River. So we learned that folks get down there on the Echo River and they like to hear us sing. Would you want to hear a verse of an old song that we sing down on the Echo River? Now, if you place yourself in the right place and you sing, you can hear that sound go down to the river and it comes back. And here's what it sounds like. It's a religious song. You know what religion means, don't you? It's a song that it's a hope, and hope is maybe someday get freedom. You know, whatever freedom is. I don't know much about it, but I want to tell you about a James Rushing Fowler. He's a soldier, and we're going to tell you what he told me. But for now, I'm just going to sing an old song that them folks sang in Tobacco Patch. See, when I was younger, down in Nashville, before they came down to Nashville and get me to work in this cave, they used to sing them songs in that Tobacco Patch, you know. So I kind of remember some of them songs. So up here, we sure learn the nice white guests like to hear us sing in the river. And it goes like this here. Now, that river's back there, so you're bound to hear this echo. It says like this. Do you got good religion? Do you got good religion? Do you got good religion? Certainly, 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 Lord. Do you love everybody? Do you love everybody? Do you love everybody? Certainly, 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 Lord. You know, them folks from England gave me 50 cents for singing that song to them. I told them next time they come back, it's going to cost them a whole $1.
Did many women come through for tours with the grand dresses that they wore then?
As a matter of fact, the girl would come through, dressed all nice, they did. Long dresses, they did. And sometimes then men would come through. You know, these men are from Philadelphia. They're Philadelphia lawyers, and they highfalutin people. Well, you can see what I'm wearing here. This is more like the cave clothes I want to wear. Maybe that catalog back there might show them some of the things that they would wear in earlier days. As a matter of fact, there's a suit called the bloomer suit. Was kind of created because you see, those girls would want to go on those tours, and sometimes we'd have to climb up a ladder, and those girls were able to wear this bloomer suit.
You only want to see that, pass it around.
Okay, here's some everyday pictures. And what to do, so we fixed it so the girls can go on tour too. Here's Thomas Bransford of Nashville, Matt's owner and daddy, yeah. And the girls, and what they did, they created this suit so the girls could go on high ledges, up and down rock cliffs, and on ladders, and they could go and take these trips and maintain their modesty, if you know what I mean, right? Yeah. But I can't understand why a man come in the cave with a tuxedo on, and one man came, he said he was a Philadelphia lawyer. You ever heard of Philadelphia? Is that far away? Is it further away than Bowling Green?
Oh, yes.
It can't be. There ain't nothing further away than that. He had a nice brass cane and looked like he had his initials engraved in the brass. Boy, he was really something. See, his shoes were shiny. He was dressed nice in a tuxedo. But guess what? Nick's kind of tricky. You know what Nick did? I'm gonna tell you another secret if you never tell nobody. Nick said that man thought he was something special coming in there with this tuxedo and these high-button shiny shoes and this cane. So Nick just made sure that he took him the roughest, dustiest Shirley could find. And them girls, those little girls, they sure look nice. Got powder on their face and rouge and stuff like that. And they've been in the cave for 8 hours on a short tour. Short tour is 8 hours, you know. Long tour is 17 hours. And they get a little dusty and a little bit dirty and dusting off their shoes. But Nick said, well, I sure had more feelings for the girls than I had for the boys. Them poor girls, but to heck with them boys. Well, this is the first time I've ever had a tour group didn't ask me no question. Do you have anything that you want to ask me about this here cave? Do you want to know what kind of rocks that you're walking on? Do you want to know what kind of rocks is overhead? Do you want to know that?
Yes, please. Yes, and yes.
Well, it's limestone. Do you want to know why the cave is so dry? Because it's got a sand and shellstone roof. Now, we have them things called stalactites and stalagmites. Do you know what they are? They look like icicles, but they're actually stone. And I heard a very important man from a place called England. He said he didn't know I was listening. He didn't know I was watching out how he writes too. You see, old captain said, now we can go in the cave with free people, but we're not supposed to learn how to read and write, you know. He said something about, I heard him tell Franklin Goring, said if them slaves learn to read and write, they might get to where they know too much about the outside world. So you don't want them learning how to read and write, because if you learn to read and write, it might open up things that they just don't need to know. But I've been watching that guy, and he told me he was writing on this thing with this pencil, called a pencil, and he said Kentucky was once a warm ancient sea. This whole eastern part of the country. And in this warm ancient sea, once upon a time and a long time ago, there was all sorts of shell and bone animals. Mother Nature created a situation where the core of the earth raised up, and then over time, silt, mud, shell, and bone animals settled very slowly with mud to create limestone. He says something about limestone is a real soft and sedimentary stone. You can take a limestone, and if you put it in something that's got acid, it will dissolve, right? Now, I don't rightly know what he was talking about, because I don't know what acid is. But I'll tell you one thing, if I ever find some acid, I'm going to put some rock in there to see if that man know what he was talking about. But he sure must be right that this cave is so dry. He said it's got a shellstone roof on it, and he's very clear to say that sand and shellstone is a harder rock than limestone, and that's why this cave is such a dry cave. He also said the only cave in the world that's a stable cave is a dry cave like Mammoth Cave. Do you know that? Did you know that change of temperature and water destabilizes any cave, right? Now, he didn't know I was writing all that down in my memory, but you know what I did for the last 5 years? I remember everything he told me, because when he goes away, I'm going to tell my guests the same thing that he's telling me today. They tell me that a smart slave is one that listens up, right? So I think I'm going to write this in my memory book, so next year people sure know what I'm talking about when I take those groups in the cave. You think that's a good idea?
I do think that's a good idea.
Let's go walking then. You know what I found out? We found out that Millie is Nick's sister. Well, you know, they told us that me and Nick are really not brothers. We thought we were brothers when we came here, but old doctor and Thomas said, well, Matt is my son, but Nick, Daddy, is actually the blacksmith that came here with us when we came here from Virginia. But you know what? Nick's sister was forced to leave Mammoth Cave, and they moved to a state called Texas, I believe. A place called Fort Worth, Texas. Have you ever heard of that?
Mm-hmm.
And so she's been gone 5 years. So there's a letter in the library where someone at Mammoth Cave wrote a letter for Nick. And he was inquiring about his sister. And he said, sir, well, we don't think Nick wrote the letter, but somebody here at Mammoth Cave was kind enough to write this letter for Nick. And it went something like this. He says, sir, I have not seen my sister Millie for 5 years. Would you be so kind to tell me whether she's dead or she alive? She had to go to Texas. Don't know why she left, but I sure would like to know if she's still a living. But seems like it's been 10 years now, and I haven't heard nothing, so I wonder if she's still alive out there. Place called Texas. You think maybe someday if I get free, I might go out there and look her up? She was my favorite sister, but I wonder what happened to her. This is a historic entrance. If you go back in there about half a mile, you know what Dr. Cron of Louisville, Kentucky did? He's a doctor, and I was told, don't know whether it's true or not, that he was interested in the cave because there's a thing called consumption. You ever heard of consumption? Mm-hmm. It's a sickness that makes you cough a whole lot. Mm-hmm. Seemed like Dr. Cron, I overheard him tell an important man up there at the old boss's office that his brother died of consumption. He's come down here during the year, and he would hear about the slaves in olden days. They leased out from around the region. They come into the cave, and they were kind of sickly and skinny and not so good. But once they got inside that cave, it appeared to the old doctor that they became robust and healthy. He thinks there's something in the cave air that could cure tuberculosis, or should I say, that was a name that was going to become called later. So he had me, Nick, and Stephen, and some more slaves to build them, take them rocks and build those huts back there. Have you ever seen them huts? It's some hospital huts back there. There was about 7 at one time, but these stone huts are put back there, and only wealthy folks like you could come down and be a part of that study. Boy, this thing called consumption is sure making a lot of people sick, and it's sure killing a lot of people. So we go back there and we build these huts, put tables and chairs in there, and Nick was able to bring in the food, and when he would blow the bugle, they would come out of the huts, these ghostly looking figures. You know what Nick told me? He said they've been down there by the orders of Dr. Cron, that they're to stay down there in the huts absolutely for 30 days at a time, or until he ordered them out. So he was down there, but he said he'd go down there and take their food and take care of all that stuff they had to get rid of, you know. And he said, I thought I would take a plant, one of these green plants in the spring to kind of cheers them up. So I took this plant down there, had a bloom on it, and he said in a day or two, that plant just kind of wilted over and died. And Nick said, I told Dr. Cron that how can anybody live down there in that dark cave? It's smoky and dark and it's damp. And if a green plant can't live down there, how in the world can people? You know what he told me? He's a whole lot smarter than I am, you know. He said, Nick, you stick to guiding and exploring and let me do the doctoring. So I was down there the other day with the tour group, you know. We stopped at these huts, and these people would come out of the huts. Oh, they looked so pitiful. one guy looked like he was bleeding from his eyes, and he'd cough, and he'd come out looking kind of pale, and he would, he walks up to one of my guests, and he say, "Oh, it's so nice to see you. I've been down here, some say, a month. What time of day is it? Is it spring? Is it summer? You see, it's in the cave. Once you down there, unless somebody's telling you, you don't know what day it is." So they would come out there coughing and stumbling around and just poor pitiful things. They go back in the huts, and we would take the tour group on. I felt so sorry for them. Only time I've seen that I'd rather be a slave than be in them huts and be sick, you know. Seemed like Stephen is talking about a toothache. Or maybe I heard he's getting sick with something. I wonder if Stephen has developed this tuberculosis thing. He's taken ill. Some say he's not going to make it. He's going to die. Matter of fact, a few days later, Stephen dies, and Nick and Matt become principal guides. So when them people in them huts down there die, sometimes their kinfolk, Dr. Cron would write a letter, said, "You folks come over here from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, or Greensburg, Kentucky, and get your dead kin." We done all we can for them, but guess what they were scared to do? They wouldn't come and get their kin for Fred that they might catch this thing called consumption. So guess who would take them up to the cemetery and bury them? Nick and Matt. So when we go back here to the cemetery, you're going to see some of the grave sites even now where people was afraid to come and get their dead. They tell me if you get tuberculosis, it can be a slow and agonizing death, be so dreaded. So in some ways, I wonder why I have not caught tuberculosis or consumption myself. But you know what? If it ain't in the cave area to keep it healthy, it must be something to do with that limestone I'm around all day. You know, here lately, we've been hearing big old guns firing. I wonder what that means. I had one guest from Philadelphia said there's something about a war. What does war mean? Something about people disagreeing about things, right? But we keep on hearing those cannons over here, boom and boom and boom. I wonder if it's gonna affect us at all, them big old cannons. I ain't seen one, but I tell you what, it sure sounds bigger than that musket I use when I go hunting rabbits.
What do you do when you're not working in the cave?
Oh, you mean during the wintertime? Oh, yeah. Well, I'm retired. I probably told you, I had 30 years with my wife, and I try not to do anything. She's retired nurse for 40 years, and registered nurse, and I work for Dow in E-Town, so we try not to do a lot in the winter, except church and civic things. It doesn't seem to be working too well, because I stay busy with something all the time.
Steven, you ever take Charlotte in the cave?
You weren't supposed to tell that. I took Charlotte in the cave.
Tell us about it.
Well, you just can't tell everything you know, but I'm going to tell you this about Charlotte. Boy, she's sure pretty. There's a place down there called Standing Rock. You know what I wrote on that rock after I drew a heart on that rock? I said, Miss Charlotte Bishop is what I wrote. I'm not supposed to know how to read and write, but you know what? I learned to read and write. So I wrote on that rock, Miss Charlotte Bishop, the rose of my heart in Mammoth Cave. Oh, she's pretty. You know, every time I see her, my heart just speeds up. But you know, if I get sick, I wonder what's going to become of her. Yeah. But Miss Charlotte Bishop, and sometimes she goes caving with me. She likes that cave too. I'll tell you one thing. You get 16 and 17-year-old slave and boy in the cave, a girl and boy in the cave by themselves, and sure gets romantic down there sometimes. You know, it seems that every day those cannon keep getting closer. I know they call them cannons because I heard old docs call them cannons, but it seems like to me, every time, every day, it sounds like that big old booming sound. Just keep on, and I got a feeling that we're gonna see some things that we ain't never seen before. One man from that place called, I believe it was Atlanta, Georgia. You heard Atlanta, Georgia? He said something about a civil war. What does Civil War mean? I asked him, and he told me, since I was a slave, I don't have to be concerned about it. But I sure wonder what a Civil War means. Well, just the other day, old Dr. Cron lets me, Stephen, and Nick go down to Bowling Green to get some supplies. While we down Bowling Green, we saw some men come up on some great big horses, and they had some gray uniform on, had some long knives. I asked that man what that long knife was. He said something about they call them swords. I just know one thing about it. It sure looks serious. So this thing, these horses that these men in these gray uniform sure look healthy and look like these men was about to do something, but I still don't know why they riding. They look so serious, and when they rode by us on these horses, I tell you, the earth just shook like thunder. These great big horses and these gray uniforms. But I have a feeling that as time goes on, we're gonna find out what the Civil War means. Well, I'll tell you what, we was down at the cave other day, then old Doc sends us over to Cave City, and we see some men in blue uniforms, and they was riding great big horses. And they sure look serious. I don't know what it means, the men in gray uniform and blue uniform, but I got a feeling that there's something real serious about this thing called a Civil War. You know what I mean? Now, I don't know what it's gonna be, but I believe it's gonna be a whole lot of action as time goes on. Please come and follow me. This here nice officer came, James Rustling Fowler was his name. He said he from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So he was an abolitionist. I asked him what does the word abolitionist mean. He said what he tries to do, he says he tries to help slaves get to freedom land, you see. He said, Matt, I tell you, if you hold on, if you just hold on a little bit longer, this Civil War is going to be over, and I believe you're going to be free. Well, be free, I don't know nothing about no being free. But he says if you hold on a little bit longer, this thing is going to be over, and maybe you can go back to Nashville where you came from when you were young. And you know, he also heard about me losing them 3 children last year. Yes, sir.
When did that tree fall down?
That tree fell down a long time ago. That's a good question. It's been there a little while, okay? Best I recollect, that tree fell in 1863.
My head was so cold.
We're about finished. He heard about me losing those children. Let me tell you, do you want to hear what happened to me and my wife, Parthena? Well, it seems that we gets to jump the broomstick in 1841. Do you know what jumping the broomstick means? It means that the owner of my wife and Thomas Bransford said we can jump the broomstick and we can get married up. We go up to the church and we take these words of promise and love. We jump the broomstick, and in 5 years we got some children. Boy, those are the prettiest little children you ever did see. They look like little happy grasshoppers out in the yard. Just as happy children you ever did see. Oh, before I go down to the cave in the morning, I see my children over there playing. I say, aren't those mighty nice children? They just happy as they can be. But you know what old Doc did? A Coates guy, his name was Coates. He had the meanness of a dabbler. He saw fit to sell 3 of my children. Thomas say that's the agreement they make, that the owner of the mother can sell the children at will. Well, a rider came up, bought my 2 girls and a boy named Thomas, last seen with their hands bound behind a rider, and my wife's Parthena, she went to bed, we thought she was gonna die. She was in such despair and sorrow. She goes running down the road behind that carriage. I said, you comes back up here. We got this one boy named Henry. She says, oh, don't take my babies out from me. Oh, she cries. Then she goes in there and she gets in the bed, and she's so sick and despaired that we had to go in there and feed her and wash her face. And she's in terrible condition. This doctor said something about she might be in a thing called depression, that she's so sorrowful about it. He says, now you know, I'm a man and I suppose I can take such things. Because this man named Rushling says, Matt, I hear that when you coloreds lose your children, it doesn't seem to bother you, they say. So I had to use certain choice of words, and I say, Captain, don't you believe that? He said, don't you believe that at all? He said, I told him that slaves got feelings just the same as white folks. He said, now, as we get older, Master Dawg don't seem to expect too much from us. For a few years now, we've been leased out to a dog. His name is Dawg. Wealthy man, not too bad a master is. Lets us live here in this cabin for no rent and nothing on the ground. But you know what I thought the other day? We sure get along good if only we had the children back. Got a good house and plenty of furniture. Sure be nice if I had my children back. So I thought I'd tell you that, but I sure found out 2 years later this Civil War is really cranking up. So we had some men that come down to the entrance of the cave and they wanted guided tours. And then a month ago, some men in gray uniforms come down to the cave and they wanted guided tours. So I told old Captain about that. I said, it's okay to take them on tours, the men in the blue uniforms and the men in the gray uniforms. He said, y'all sure can. He said, but whatever you do, don't never take them men in blue uniforms in the cave and them men in gray uniform in the cave on the same tour. He says, if you do, it's bound to be trouble. So we had to make sure that we never do that, you know. Well, you folks sure have been a mighty nice group of folks. I hear that I have another party today from Nashville. Nashville's favorite to me. As a matter of fact, there's an avenue in Nashville called Bransford Avenue. Do you want to know how it got its name? It's named from Thomas Bransford, my daddy. He's president of the L&N Railroad. He's powerful. He ran for the 1861 state senate. I heard he wasn't elected, but I'll tell you one thing about it. That Bransford Avenue in Metro Nashville, still there today, named from Thomas Bransford, my daddy. And you know what? Old Thomas Bransford, my daddy, is a married man with children of his own, but seemed like me, he's mighty quick to tell people that he's got a mulatto son at Mammoth Cave named Matt. That's me. Now, it seems strange that 2 years ago, Thomas Bransford of Nashville took sick and passed away. But I suppose it wasn't too bad because he has a son named Thomas Bransford Jr. And guess what? He inherits me. My half-brother inherits me as part of his daddy's estate. So I just want to make sure you knew that. Well, you folks have been a mighty fine tour group of people. Sure glad you came with me. Would stay with you longer, but I got another group here in about 10 minutes. So sure glad you came to visit Mammoth Cave. And I'll tell you what, even if they freeze me from Mammoth Cave, I got a feeling that I'm going to stay. Because you know what? I don't know what's out there, but I sure know what's here. Life ain't too bad. Been in slavery and been a guide. I'm a guide. I'll go in the cave, stay all day, find places, and free people ask me. Well, I tell you how I found out. After my children were sold for me, Nick became restless. He wanted to buy his freedom papers. So old Thomas say, Nick, you raised me $600 and I'll free you. He did. Took him about 8 years to raise that money. He raised his money and bought his freedom papers. He did. Had a piece of paper that had the old owner's name, say he's a free man. He goes and back to Nashville. He gets down there in the hay field, in the barn lots, and he's soon to find out that just because you have a piece of paper or something they call a document says you're free, doesn't mean people treat you so good. So my brother stayed gone just 1 year. He come back and he tell me, he said, well, if I have to be a slave, I'd rather be a slave at Mammoth Cave where free people ask me what to do because I am too smart to work in a barn lot. You agree? Well, again, folks, you all been mighty kind. I sure hope to see you next year on this tour.
Did I get to see something?
Pardon me?
He said, would you like to see something?
Yes.
There's a long worm.
There's a long worm. That's a government long worm, sir. So anyway, so while you're back here, look over at them graves. And you know what? A wealthy man from Philadelphia promised Charlotte that he would see the Charlotte that Stephen had a proper headstone. You know, he gets to get buried up here in the all-white cemetery, and me and Nick gonna be buried over in our family cemetery. So that grave back there is a Union soldier's headstone, but he sure kept his promise. Shipped that stone all the way down from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and they puts it up and corrected the date a few years ago. So look at Stephen's headstone. Don't it sure look nice? I want to make sure you remember Stephen, the most original guide me and Nick and Matt, we sure learned a whole lot from Stephen, but we've learned a whole lot from each other. 'Cause we learned this right here. In certain situations, free people just might ask a slave what to do next. Thank you all so much for coming with me today.